Should I go here? Yeah, okay, you can hear me. Wow. Hi everybody, I am Sebastian Graham, the Programme Manager for the Linen Biennale Northern Ireland 2023. Breathe. It's lovely to see so many people here at lunchtime on a Friday for this lecture. And I'm very excited to listen to it. So just by way of context, obviously a lot of you picked up the programme from the back of the room, but the Linen Biennale is basically a festival that celebrates linen that happens every 2 years. People always go, how do you pronounce it? And Biennale, biennial, whatever way you want it yourself, it's totally fine, but Biennale is what we go for. The Linen Biennale was initiated by Our Space Gallery in Lisburn, and this year it has been funded by the National Lottery Heritage Fund. Our Space Gallery is also supported by the Arts Council Northern Ireland. So arts, visual, craft, all of this kind of creative programming is really, really important to us. In 2018, the inaugural year, we had a central conference, which was really important and really stimulated a lot of new thinking around linen. This year, we're not having a conference, but instead we're programming talks, of which this is one of them, around 4 main themes of environment, material, narrative, and industry. And I think Sebastian's talk will cover quite a few of those topics today. It's hard to know where one thing begins and ends. Partnerships are super, super important to us. We wouldn't be able to achieve anything without partnerships, with funders, with the people that have all the specialist knowledge, with organisations like the Linen Hall here, Ulster University, the museums. Partners are many, and you can find a list at the back of your programme if you picked one up. On that note, because I bang on about it all the time, the booklet, even the website, is not a it's not a finished article. This is a process that is not, this is our program and that is all it is. We are always looking for people with stories, with links to knowledge, with different pieces of information. We really want to hear them. So there's obviously myself as a program manager. Anthea, who's one of the Pulse founders, is at the back here, as is our chair, Alan Clark. At the end of Sebastian's presentation, there'll be some questions, but also if you want to talk to any of us about something that's of interest to you, if you have any linen stories, memories, etc., we really want to hear them. And also you can get in touch with us through the contact form on our website. I want to say as well that there are some evaluation forms on the chairs. As this is a funded project, that kind of information is really important to us, and for finding out who our audience is and why you came along today. So I will remind you at the end to fill them out if you please possibly can. There's also a QR code for a digital evaluation survey at the end. And finally, I want to say a big thank you to Sebastian for coming along and agreeing to do this today. I've had the pleasure of listening to him speak before, and it was very informative and very interesting. He is the Heritage at Risk Officer with Ulster Architectural Heritage, but also this research that he's done on mills is a really big part of his own personal research and a personal passion project, so he'll definitely have lots of interesting things to say. So without further ado, please come up and enlighten us all. Thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you very much for that introduction. And yeah, it's really great to speak to such a fantastic big audience here today, and delighted to share my knowledge and kind of hopefully plans for what we can do with all these fantastic buildings and history that we have left across Northern Ireland. Yes, I should say, I mean, this all kind of stemmed from back when I was in my early 20s, and as I say, social life was maybe a wee bit lacking, because I set up at night researching where all these mills were, looking at ordnance survey maps and the valuation revision books on Prony. Went through every single valuation revision book on Prony. I think that's if anyone's from Prony, you can thank me at some stage, because that's like that. It took seven years just to do that. But that's literally pinned all that information and put it onto a map and a database that we can appreciate the location of where these buildings were. And I mean, I'm not as active, as I say, as I probably should be regarding the research anymore. But I mean, I still get people that emailing me saying, "Oh, I've been able to trace my ancestor back to the mid-1700s thanks to your website." So it has been very useful. But yes, the talk here will be about these fantastic structures that we have here that are at risk, the future of them, and what we can, I suppose, learn from across the water as well. A few case studies. Now, I'm very optimistic with my 59 slides here. We may have to skip through quite a lot of them. And the first bit, unfortunately, is very saddening to see a lot of these empty sites, but it's just the reality of it is. So we have here on the left the architectural detailing upon one of the mills at the Hildon. And this is at a site near to me in Coke, just outside Cookstown, Duff's Mill, which is unfortunately it's lying kind of perilous with the chimney going to fall down. So the mills, it's early 2010s, started to do this in my own spare time. I was a tour guide at Welbert Beetling Mill, showing people all around. Everyone asked, there was a mill in Keady, there was a mill here, and I just thought to myself, well, I'd like to find out where these buildings are, and then that led me to physically mapping them out. So roughly in Northern Ireland, I suppose at one stage there was about 4,500 mills, and about 3 years ago I tried to do the whole of Ireland, and then I got married, and then I had a child. So that's been put on a permanent hold. So I did the rest of Ulster, and I kind of stuck at Sligo at the minute, so I haven't looked at it in a long time. So you can see that research at millsofnorthernireland.com, very inventive title. So really, it's kind of quite sad, I suppose, you know, the huge impact that these mills and the linen industry more associated, I suppose. It brought hundreds and thousands of people into employment. It's kind of started this niche industry within the UK, this kind of in Ulster. But I suppose the 50s, 60s weren't very kind. You had the man-made materials, you had, I suppose, changing fashions, and linen gets very creased, as you can see. I'm kind of demonstrating part of its weakness, but at the same time, it is the most, I suppose, sustainable product that we ever produced, and we didn't rant and rave about it back in the early days. You know, we just did it, and of course now we're discovering that, you know, all these man-made materials are not the end all to be all. They're actually quite harmful. So we have all these now redundant sites that kind of spun and created all this cloth we all would have wore and kind of in our dining rooms and this, that, and the other. So kind of statistic-wise, you know, in the 1860s, you know, we had like 1,400 scutching mills for processing flax. Today we have 3. 2 of them kind of work as like a McConville's. I'm sure you all know McConville's, Dromore. We have outside Ennish Scotch Mill in County Tyrone. Harold Bennett there still scotches the odd time for Heritage Open Day. And also, quite interestingly, which is on the programme, we have Mallin's new marvellous machine that they've got going outside Pomroy in County Tyrone, one of their turbine scotching machines that they've got on running. It's real labour of love there. So not that I'm saying that, you know, we should bring back these scotching mills, but just highlights the decrease. The vast majority of the remaining mills, you know, have very little machinery or are about to fall down. I suppose corn mills, you know, as well, not really associated today with what we're talking about, but, you know, we don't have any real small producer of flour. Compared to the UK, where during COVID they saw crazy demands, people getting waiting lists for 4 or 5 years. You know, why don't we have that over here? All these vacant textile sites. This is off Donegal Street, Rydalmere Street. One of these kind of modern early 1900s flax sites, spinning processing sites. Closely, I suppose, associated to my role as the Heritage at Risk Officer, we have 72 mill sites on this at-risk register across Northern Ireland. There's 1,037 at-risk buildings all across Northern Ireland. 72 are made up of these mills. So that negativity, I suppose, is balanced to what we actually we need to reuse these sites. You know, they're now seen as embodied carbon. It makes more sense to reuse these sites. instead of demolish and start all over again. So I think we are starting to see that now. The actual reality of that is still to be realised in a number of cases. But just to give you an idea of the Heritage at Risk project, so it's been going since 1993, and it's a partnership with the Department for Communities Historic Environment Division. This is actually the 30th year anniversary, I suppose, of the at-risk register, but I don't think we'll be celebrating too much with the sheer amount of buildings that are on the register, unfortunately. So it highlights buildings that are, I suppose, listed, some unlisted buildings as well, buildings that are important locally, historically, and nationally as well. We try to, I suppose, speak to owners, give them updated advice regarding funding, give them advice on what to do with maintenance and things like that. And importantly, they are buildings of potential. So just to kind of jump straight into, I suppose, some of the mills that we've got here. I mean, we have, Jennymount Mill, very close, just in North Belfast, North Dunkery Street. It's just amazing that this building's, here. If you are from Belfast, I'm sure you already know it, but you'll see it on the motorway, on the M2 when you come into Belfast. You see the big chimney. You see the kind of the 6 or 7 story tall building. But you'll also note that you have this very fine building at the end, just towards the line derelict, with the kind of Italian style, and all the windows, openings, and doors have these literary figures sculpted above them. All the important people of the time, Shakespeare and all that. And this very much harks into what the ethos of these linen mills. These were not just processing, I suppose, centres. They were, I suppose, real cultural buildings of importance as well. People were coming every day, workers, to these sites. And, and I suppose the mill owners wanted to enlighten the workers, but also to the customers as well. They say, oh, look at us, we have Galileo here above. You're walking in the footsteps of Galileo with his linen, this, that, and the other. So they tried to, and even a lot of the warehouses in Belfast City Centre, you'll see a lot of these sculpted heads, and just to stick out from the crowd. Jennymount gets its name. I think there was a big house in that area called Jennymount, and then the name. It was built around 1852 for James McKee. The adjacent building, the Linen building, is the kind of the larger addition. But generally, these mills started off, and then they added bits and pieces, and they get taller and taller and taller. I suppose that was when they discovered you can all these iron frames, you could build these mills up instead of on huge, big, sprawling sites. They just got taller and taller and taller. And also the building materials changed as well. So you went from having stone and rubble buildings to the brick, which was a lot cheaper. And, that's kind of what the way it went. So the M2 one's probably roughly down here. And you'll see the big chimney, obviously, the Thompson's big mills here. And you can still see these buildings here, but and then the 7-story kind of building there, which is in partial use. But that picture tells, I suppose, so many stories. You've got the industrialisation, you've got the trains, train track, you've got the row of terraced houses where everyone, all the workers would have lived. Right up to the front door almost. Then you have the church at the top. So that was the whole community. That was their central. That was their life essentially. You could go to work, go to church, go back home, and in a very, very short space of time. And that was, I suppose, decentralising things as well. So spreading wealth and employment out to places at the time. Of course, all the mill pond as well. A lot of these places needed. But unfortunately today it's a bit of a sore sight what we've got left. I mean, this building kind of is, I think, it's roofless. This one here, unfortunately, is before the heads. It's not in good shape either. That's it today. It's a lot of the vegetation and things like that were out of it. It's a kind of a shot of that building, which is just down at the very far end. I should say there was like a huge big redevelopment there in the early 2000s, which did give the building partial use. But I suppose it's the scale of that, getting that into full, I suppose, usage can be quite difficult. I mean, the developers would have spent millions, and then are just going to let it out for free. They need to have a return on that, which can pose problems if you've stuck to a big project and you're trying to recoup that in later years. So I think there's a couple of units, floors that are available to rent. I looked at the price, and I don't think I'll be going in there anytime soon. Let's just say. But you know, huge, fantastic building of such potential, which has been realised. But I suppose getting that other building further down, I mean, what would you transfer that into? It's beside a major roadway, beside a train track as well. So it can be quite difficult to find uses for a lot of these buildings. It can be quite straightforward in some cases, but others it's not so much. This is another mill. I just, you know, being from Cookstown, you don't really get out and about too much, I suppose. But you know, sometimes you take a wee travel out and you find these big places. My goodness, we are such a small country, but such a fantastic country. What we constructed in the past. It's a Cobury Mill, just outside Ballyclare. This is actually quite unusual. This building isn't listed, despite it being just a remarkable piece of architecture and history. 4 stories, basalt, flax spinning mill from the 1840s. Quite an interesting fact, has one of the oldest cinemas in Ireland, dating from about 1921, that was used within the site. Again, a lot of the workers, to keep them, I suppose, to keep them local, they needed sports, they needed entertainment, they needed housing, and that was all provided for them by these mill owners. Again, it was a victim, I suppose, of the continued merging of these linen companies. One, they're bought over by another company and another company and another company, and then they couldn't compete with the likes of, you know, East Asia and things like that. So that was essentially them. It was used for a variety of different purposes, kind of industrial kind of warehouses and things like that, but currently vacant. And the owner actually is looking to do something positive with this, but I think it is the scale of what, again, you do here. I mean, apartments or something like that would be kind of a realistic, I suppose, use of that. But again, getting the scaling of that correct, the reality of that as well in kind of a rural area. Cobury had its own village just opposite the mill, which is completely gone. The village, the old village anyway, that's been replaced by kind of more modern housing. So the row of terrace houses is no more. The chimney, I think, is gone as well. So there's actually, when you start looking at these places today in 2023, you look at Cobury, you just look at, you don't really actually understand that Cobury exists on a map, but in the 1800s, it was a whole village in itself, a whole community. But now it's kind of lost its, I suppose, half of its history with the housing gone. But that's happened to a lot of places around Northern Ireland where they've actually lost the mill. It's all the way around. So Milford Village in County Armagh, they've lost their mill, but they still have the terrace houses. And some places have lost it all, of course. So again, one of these earlier sites in the 1800s, they were kind of rubble construction of what they had nearby, which was, in this case, basalt rock, and later the brick additions that were used, and lovely weather vane on the left-hand side of the building. Balnamore Mill. So all these buildings are on the buildings at risk register. Another kind of substantial tall building, constructed in 1866. So during this linen boom during the American Civil War, just after the American Civil War, some companies made massive profits from this, and all those grand warehouses we see in Belfast city centre were kind of financed by these companies, I suppose, and then they're looking to expand and again show off their wealth. So it started off, it's kind of like a local operation. Again, the mill village sprung up beside the factory, and then the Braidwater Spinning Company bought it in 1886 in Ballina and extended all through it. And then Hale Martin and Company, another big name, bought it in the 1920s. Again, another casualty of the 50s. It closed. So again, the spinning mills were quite susceptible to this because just how, I suppose, easy it was for other, I suppose, lower paid countries and areas to just could just capitalise on the fact that they weren't paying much. They also had closer raw materials, and again, kind of a big reason why the whole linen industry failed quite dramatically. Like, we had 300,000 acres of flax grown in Ulster in the mid-1860s, and then about 1910, it was like 30,000 acres, and then it got even worse and lower and lower and lower. The two world wars helped increase production again, but it just wasn't sustained. And after the wars ended, no one wanted linen. We stopped growing flax. We stopped incentivizing it, and in other countries, Eastern Europe, Soviet Union, could just grow it on an industrial scale. It didn't really matter what the quality was. So they kind of took over from that, and then East Asia subsequently took over from that as well. Quite an interesting, I didn't know anything about this at all, but during the Troubles, it was used as a government store for giving out supplies to families that had been affected by the Troubles. That's kind of an interesting link to that building. But yeah, today it's this is, I suppose, a postcard of that site. Again, the mill pond and all the terrace houses across the site. That's kind of an overhead aerial image of the factory. You have the chimney still there, and the main kind of building still there. And how these buildings are so similar, like they're not any way different to each other. You walk through the front door, and there's generally like a big open space. The same upper floors are the exact same, just a huge open expanse, like a blank canvas essentially. So they were crying out to some extent to be reused because of the nature of them. Generally, they have all these kind of vaulted ceilings with the fireproofing that they have. Little's Mill, Donaghcloney. This is an awful sad case here of the deterioration and decline of a site. Linen has been produced there since the mid-1700s. Damask linen was I suppose, the big niche that they followed on, which is kind of the reason why you have these sawtooth weaving sheds here. That's that kind of novel design that they all kind of used in the weaving factories. The linen tablecloths for the Titanic came from there, but unfortunately, again, they wind down in the early 2000s. I think it was one of these examples of takeover after takeover, and just kind of finding all the ways to cut the company down. And in this image, you can see all the workers streaming in or out of the factory. It's quite a vast site, as you can see that there. And there was in 2007 they found over 1,500 of these glass plate negatives. I think that was part of the Biennale scheme back in 2018 to bring these out to display. And there's a good there's a website associated with that. And they're just amazing. Like the original prints of linen going back hundreds of years, I suppose, was on these negatives. So what have we got left of Little's Mill? Well, sadly, we've got this one long bit here, and the chimney and the front facade of this to rest. So I've just got to highlight what we have. This retains here, the chimney retains, and the front bit of this building has been retained. That's all that's left there. The rest, this is all kind of housing development. The cricket pitch is still there. I should say that's still there. But you can see the housing, the encroachment there, which I suppose would have been technically brownfield land, so that was kind of ready for development. But at the same time, it's kind of eroded the historic nature of the building. So this is kind of all that's left there. And the chimney and the front of this has now been propped up. So the building, what was happened when it closed, there had been partial demolition of the site, and it was spot listed by the government in 2009. So that stopped any more demolition. But by that stage, the vast majority had been demolished, and it's now quite a difficult site to reuse those buildings. I suppose now there is quite an active community group there who are willing to use that site, but that comes at a cost for the developer. Again, has to I suppose, find being reimbursed, I suppose, to be incentivised to kind of relinquish it. Again, sites that have been utilised for housing in that case. What's the future of, say, the front of this building here? What's the future of the chimney? It's kind of a bit of an unknown. Sorry to be depressing on a Friday afternoon. It does get better. I will avoid you. Herdman's Mill, the most, I suppose, one of our most important buildings in Northern Ireland. Again, that's Italian in style, WH Linen, 1853. Modern buildings didn't need all these huge big floors, so they were just flat warehouses essentially, and you could put all this machinery in. But even they, having most high-tech equipment, couldn't last. Closed in 2004. Various arson attacks to the building have left it now completely open to the elements, roofless. It's actually quite sad that on the BBC, you can look up the kind of news articles about it, but 2002 there were plans to transform that into like a cultural community conference centres. I suppose at that time was a big thing, but it didn't come down to anything. The plans required £25 million. I suppose £25 million times by maybe 10 now. So such a vast site there, but I don't think all hope is lost there. There's case studies in England where worse buildings have been brought back into use, and I mean this is where I think government and local councils should be stepping up, standing in for heritage, because if you lose that mill, the Sion Mills, you've only got Sion, you've only got half of the village. Such an important, like Bessbrook, such an important landmark to that village. Bessbrook, in another of these model villages set up by the Richardson family, Quakers, they started spinning linen, and then they also started to weave linen as well. So they kind of monopolised in the whole start, finish, and end of the whole processes, which was a very self-sufficient thing to do. A lot of these buildings specialised in one industry at one part of the process, of spinning, and they could easily be undercut. By having this diverse range of activities, you could suppose continue going. That's kind of an overview, I suppose, an idyllic sense of the background of the building in its heyday. So again, yeah, closed 1970, requisitioned by the army for about 40 years during the Troubles, and actually just yesterday, believe it or not, plans have went out to redevelop this site. Now, this is again, this is where it can get very, very complicated and quite difficult to know what to do with these sites, because developers see this as, I suppose, enabling development, saving the heritage structure, but also, I suppose, plastering it in a lot of houses, a lot of other bits and pieces. So, construction company Foreststone have announced plans to build 149 apartments within the mill building, 58 new build houses on the site, 2 retail units, 3 office units, and a gym. Now, getting that balance of protecting the site and overdeveloping can be quite difficult. They're going to, the construction developers will argue that this is to make it viable. So then you're kind of stuck in the middle. So you want to do the best for these buildings, but you don't want to be, I suppose, over hindering it, and you actually lose quite a lot, I suppose, of the building. But do you want that to go the whole way as Sion Mills? It's very, very difficult. Very, very difficult to get a correct answer on that. A lot of this could be last chance saloon to save Bessbrook, but if you ask the people of Bessbrook, they may have completely, actually quite a lot of them would say that this is just too much and it's going to destroy that site. Similarly, with William Clark and Sons Upperlands, one of our prestigious last remaining, I suppose, kind of a big employers of linen. Been there since the 1730s. The fantastic book Linen on the Green by Wallace Clark, yes, that's his name. It's just fantastic history, illustrated history of that whole development of Upperlands and the factory itself. And again, you can see that again, the size and scale of the factory is quite amazing. And these 3 ponds that powered it, you know, all the sustainable, reusable energy that they were using back then, it's quite remarkable. Part of the site is listed to talk about overall heritage importance of the site. It's enhanced by the presence of the surviving bleach stream, mill dams, and water power infrastructure, as well as the group value of historically related buildings and structures throughout the village of Upperlands. So that whole, again, model mill village of Upperlands, this owes all of its existence to the Clarks and the Linen factory. Unfortunately, this is another sad story where part of the building was went on fire in 2017, and I suppose part of them making that business sustainable and making it more relevant, they're moving a lot of their processing to a new build facility, not on the site, just maybe, I think it's a mile down the road from where the factory is. So then that begs the question, what do we do with the site of Clarks of Upperlands? So there has been a scheme proposed since 2009, 144 new build dwellings, 66 residential units within the original buildings. The Planning Appeal Committee approved that scheme for heritage-led mixed-use regeneration scheme in 2022, and work is to begin there in 2024 on the redevelopment of that site. So again, as I said, it's quite a vast site, and you know, there's different houses there, but you know, they have obviously retaining the listed elements of those buildings. Again, similarly to a lot of these schemes, you know, who makes the decision there? I mean, as to say, well, actually, you've redeveloped that site too much, and you've actually lost the historical importance of that, but at the same time, you have to retain what is there. I mean, there are examples in England where, which I'll come to later, to show you that, you know, that they can work quite well together. Guildford Mill, it's a place I'm almost sick of saying because I've been there twice, I've been filmed there twice in the last couple of years, looking at it. So I think the next season of Abandoned Engineering, if you look out for that, you might see me on it, or you might not. And if you don't see me on it, I'll be quite embarrassed because I spent a whole day there filming. So constructed in 1838 by Hugh Dunbar and associates, I suppose, and you know, spread out more and more and more, merged with the Barber Threads to become the Linen Thread Company, and closed in 1986. So as I was saying, these sites are very, very similar. It's a big open space, the vaulted ceilings, those brick vaults for the early fireproofing. So in some regards, you know, they can be quite easily, new use can be quite easily found for them. Like, look at the natural lighting coming in there. Yeah, you probably need quite an imaginative architect to kind of break that all down into its components. But I suppose there have been plans here. Multi-million-pound shopping centre was the first one in the early 2000s. That didn't come to anything. And it's been lying kind of empty since the Carl Management Group since bought it, and they have plans for quite a modest scheme and quite a realistic scheme. I think of all the schemes, I think this is probably the most perspective, I suppose, of the history and surrounding area. So you got design of a rooftop garden, some stays there, restaurant, garden centre, and apartments as well. So it's kind of bringing a wee bit more life to that part of Guildford, because it's kind of in the northern bounds of Guildford, and hopefully that can kind of trigger natural regeneration there, and affordability as well. Finally, I think for the negative stories, or the derelict mills, Hilden Mill, 1823, Barber Threads, of course, sold in 2015. It's been owned by a number of different developers, and current owners PJK Developments planning for 230 houses on that site. No application has been put forward yet, but just again recently they got approval to take down unstable buildings because of the vandalism, the fire damage that's been going on there. Now, Hopefully that will be reinstated at some stage, but there needs to be a timeline needs to be set in there, because if you start dismantling this, that, and the other at some stage, you have to put it back again, or else you lose the whole readability of the whole area. Again, they love their sculpted heads and a lot of these buildings. So what do we need, essentially? What do we need to do with these buildings? So we need to obviously realize the potential. They do need to be developed one way or the other. It has to address, I suppose, the housing crisis, but it also has to address, I suppose, the heritage at risk crisis. We need to reuse historic buildings first, as opposed to building new developments, destroying the green fields, destroying our green belt. In Belfast, you have lack of artist studio space, so there's an opportunity for people to, I suppose, spread their wings and look outside Belfast, look outside to other locations to make it more diverse. Obviously, the carbon implications of reusing a building that's already constructed is significantly less considered to the modern buildings that we're seeing today in Belfast. Also, the modern buildings only have a short lifespan. They're dictated by all these structural reports that can say that building is only 50 years lifespan. And after 50 years, we'll have to do either significant refurbishment or demolish it. That's complete nonsense. In today's world, we're building buildings now that we'll be demolishing in 50 years' time. So it's ludicrous. And also bringing these key buildings back into the community use. And it's common sense. I said greener regeneration. It's not exactly 100% green, but it's better than the alternative. The important considerations are, as I've said, massing, ensuring that we don't completely overdo these sites, don't completely cover them in housing, and use the surrounding brown field. That's really where the money lies. It's the land around these mills and buildings, not the actual physical building itself. Affordability and bringing in the community, they need to be, I suppose, more involved in the decision-making processes, one way or the other. And also making sure that they're fit for the future. They are producing electricity themselves, which is back when they were, a lot of these mills, and green spaces as well. That's kind of a thing lacking in a lot of these projects, the lack of, I suppose, parkland or trees and things like that, which we know we need to have more trees for shading and reducing temperatures. All linking into the Sustainable Development Goals, which I'm sure we've all heard of one way or the other. Number 12 talks about responsible consumption and production, reducing our construction waste, reusing these buildings that we have all around us that are in Belfast city centre. We walk past them all the time. Why aren't we reusing these first and building up in up in the mountain, essentially, in other places? But also ensuring that there are rules there to make sure that it can be afforded by the local population. So I asked a very interesting question to Google Bard, or I suppose the ChatGPT. So do these buildings have a future? And the answer was surprising, and a lot of it was mumbo jumbo, which I'm not going to quote because it was saying about a lot of buildings that have been restored, but they haven't been. So the threat of AI is not quite upon us yet. So abandoned mills in Northern Ireland, according to Google Bard, have a future, growing interest in repurposing these mills into creative spaces, co-working spaces, artistic and retail spaces. So, if Google Bard can tell us that, we all know it ourselves, why aren't we doing it? But to some extent we are. We have been doing it over the last years, but very quietly. I honestly don't think these projects get enough respect or enough acknowledgement as they should do. So at Conway Mill, for example, a huge big project there in 2010, early 2000s to make that, I suppose, a business space, workspace as well, that works for the local community, that really took off. And that's a fantastic space there. It's there about 2 years ago, and just before COVID, sorry. And kind of a real activity, I suppose, the community centre, that was kind of the perfect way to describe it. It's got this kind of a central atrium and all these kind of businesses spread throughout, keeping, I suppose, employment local to that area, keeping opportunities local to that area, and ensuring that we don't, rush the Belfast city centre and become, filling this place up with 4 skyscrapers. H&J Martin were those people completing the refurbishment of that site. It's a former flax mill, and yeah, so I would advise you all to take a wee trip out there. And when you're near there, you can see the Clonard Ross mill as well. That was another great development that's restored and kept that building now. Architects must have a say in doing their wee modern thing. So I think we can trade that off. We can't all just I suppose stick to the old-fashioned brick and this, that, and the other. So I think we can make these trade-offs, as they come. That's quite tasteful compared to a lot of them across the water. But yeah, these are schemes now that they were a huge scheme. That was 10.8 million to do that. 165 affordable homes it talks about. I was an Edinburgh-based architects group that done that, and completed in 2008. We also have very important and useful work in Portview's Trade Centre, the banana block, and that kind of thriving area. That seems to be the go-to place now. I've actually never been there, believe it or not, yet, but I hopefully will go very soon. Fantastic mill, again, this brick dating to the early 1900s when Belfast brick was the go-to, I suppose, product. Partly in disrepair and half vacant, but Portview Trade Centre received money, support over the years, to tourism and museums as well. And I've also got some private, people coming in, boundary brewing, different kind of growers as well. So it's all kind of kicking off there. So it seems to be the place to be. Again, keeping that jobs, creativity, and opportunities in East Belfast. Important for any kind of area to have these opportunities local to them. Brookfield Mill from the road, which has just been restored within the last year. So again, it was always a bit of an eyesore. You think to yourself, why on earth has no one done anything with that yet? And thankfully now we can maybe stop saying that. I haven't been to that one just yet. This is street view imagery of this. 1850s flax spinning mill, Brookfield Linen Company, closed in the 1960s. So £13 million investment for 55 apartments, 22 houses. Again, this is an unlisted building, so there's no, I suppose, statutory control. Essentially, they could have demolished it, but that would have been a very poor thing to do. But it's good to see that developers and housing associations can now see the potential that these structures have, and they actually need to do more case studies to say, well, this building only cost us 1 million tons of carbon as opposed to 100 million as opposed to new build. We need to get that message out there. We need to have a carbon sort of tax on these buildings as well to say that, disincentivize demolition. Cumber, we have Andrews Mill, which is another, I suppose, key building to that locality, which thankfully was done up in about 2008. £40 million restoration to turn them into luxury apartments and other sorts of phases. I think the company that actually did that went out of business like 4 or 5 years right after that. So again, there is huge, not to be bashing the developers and this, that, and the other. I mean, they do put a lot of risk into investing in these buildings. There can be an awful lot of unforeseen changes to the buildings. I mean, structural reports can identify huge problems in a lot of these buildings. So they are seeing that there's a risk, but they know that the risk is kind of worth taking as well. And also to give credit to our councils, Newton Abbey Council saved the Mossley Mill from demolition when it closed in 1985. They moved their civic headquarters there in the 2000s, and the theatre museum from 2010. So, I mean, it's very good to see that, and it's good to see that kind of investment, but kind of need to get that to other councils as well to see the potential that these huge, like centralised buildings, can do. So we need to obviously see the examples here and use them. And the work doesn't end with the restoration. There's plans to incorporate renewable heating systems to cut down on heat, turbines using the water supply. I mean, that would have been that should have been, I suppose, looking forward to the future. That should have been what we did in the first case, but we're now seeing an immediate need to do this. Hydroelectricity is becoming a kind of a big thing on a small scale. It's not going to solve all of our problems, but it's a start. So you're seeing a lot of these Archimedes screws in some rivers across Northern Ireland. Now, there are planning and environmental considerations regarding them. More recently, you have heat from water. So essentially putting in like a cage into the water with pipes into your house and using the ambient heat within those mill ponds, and they can heat not all of your house or the mill, but like 3/4 of it or half of it. So there are, important things that can be done there. And in the north of England have commissioned a study, Historic England, looking at how to repurpose and reuse these textile sites. They noted in their report in 2021, 688 mills, 2.3 million square meters of vacant floor space, which is a huge amount of area. And they roughly calculated that out to be 8.3 billion worth of, I suppose, potential in that. Again, Yorkshire's former mills could create 9,000 new homes. So again, that seems to be the way this is all going. And the case studies in England, we have the big example of Shrewsbury Flaxmill Malting. It's a huge big project over there from the Heritage Lottery Fund, 20 million. It was acquired, that site acquired by Historic England. Plans for homes, office space, visitor attractions, and all sorts. So there are things happening all across the UK. They're looking into heat and pumps, and also acknowledge the brownfield site to reuse that site, but also to make sure that building materials are recycled as much. That's it currently today. It's still ongoing. These projects take a long time. This one's nearly approaching 10 years, but just shows you that these things just don't happen overnight. And they have a range of funders and backers. There's just so many to involve. Another example in Leeds, kind of a hugely derelict building since the 70s, very similar to a lot of examples over here. That's it there. It's revamped to Riverside, Victoria Riverside, a £50 million revamp. A huge big site. That's it kind of at the minute. Suppose capitalising on, Leeds being kind of this fintech, hub. Manchester, this is an example of, creative studios, very much like Port Free Trade Centre, all sorts of co-working spaces in there. So just to recap, what is needed? Councils, government need to work closely together to either acquire these buildings at an advanced stage. We've missed out on quite a large amount of these sites because they need to step in to see the importance of these buildings, but also the community and local need for them as well. They need to incorporate green technology and systems. And we also need to understand the problem over here as well. We need to commission reports like they have in Yorkshire and North England. How many sites do we have vacant in Northern Ireland? What is the square meterage? What can they be possibly used for? What is the local need? We need to get that off the ground before these developments pop up left, right, and centre of putting 10,000 houses here, 10,000 there. It's just, we need to use them first in a more sustainable fashion. So the future can be rewarding. Rescue Mill, Brochet, Conway Mill, but if we don't act, we derelict buildings like the one in the mill in Dunmurray in the top left, which was proposed for demolition, I think probably still is. This is the Braidwater Mill in Ballymena, and we have the Ballyclare Paper Mill, which we have Fred Dibna to thank for that one, who brought down the chimney there from that site. So Ballyclare was once called Paper Town because of all the paper mills, but who knew that fact before before that? There's no more paper mills in Ballyclare. So yes, hopefully that wasn't too depressing for you, but it's stating the facts. We need to act. We need to save these buildings, and we need to also stand up for them as well, because buildings don't talk, and but we do. I do. I've talked too long. So thank you very much.
thank Sebastian for a fantastic talk. There is time for a few questions actually. So I have the mic here, and yes, and I come round. So if anybody, if you do want to raise your hand, and I come and give you the mic. Okay, here we are.
Thank you. Just very quickly, what happened to the equipment that was in those minutes? Because I was talking to Newton and Council about their mill, and they would quite like to have like a tourist attraction based on those machines, but they would need to buy one.
Yeah. So in a lot of cases, I suppose when these mills closed, the owners saw that, I suppose, the potential scrap value, I suppose. Herdman's, I think they may have shipped theirs off to South Africa or Pakistan or something like that there. So we had the best equipment. We had Mackies, we had all the people, and we essentially just shipped it off to someone else to do it for cheaper in a lot of cases. But saying that, I mean, a lot of it, some of it was donated to museums, and I suppose, where they went to. I think the museums do have a large collection of, I suppose, industrial equipment, which would be interesting to bring that back into public light, because we need to, if we're talking about encouraging next generation of engineers or climate scientists or smart people, the people that created the steam engines and things like that, the textile machinery, I mean, they were created to be efficient, to be most efficient as they possibly could. So we need to encourage that, and we need to show that this is what the Jacquard loom was, the first computer, essentially. That's what we need to encourage and inspire people as well. But yeah, I would say a lot of it's in either scrap or some people may have it in their back. I know a lot of turbines are in people's sheds and things like that. So surprise you what's out there, I think.
Your recap outlining the sort of decisions that need to be made and the disincentivization of just building houses and encouraging reuse, presumably without any decision makers at Stormont. That's sort of paralyzed, is that correct? Or can that happen without the sort of action we've got?
I mean, for a lot of them, because of the planning's now devolved to the councils, since 2015, I mean, it can go like clockwork now. I mean, the big schemes would have to go to DFI, and I'm not entirely sure how they get around to actually doing that without the minister in charge. But I mean, it all, I suppose, now falls down to the councils who have the ultimate say and have the ultimate also rules and regulations powers to stop vacancy and demolition. I mean, the buck stops with them. So I mean, they kind of need to realize this as well. But yeah, I feel that people are kind of left out by the decision being made, and then suddenly there's a huge big development on their doorstep. I don't think that planning process isn't as transparent as it used to be when you read your local paper and the decision was there, the outline. Now you have to go onto a planning portal website, which is atrocious, and you also have to, and then you have to, if you're from Mid-Ulster like me, you have to use their own separate planning portal. So it can be very, very difficult to get around that. But in saying that, that does fall down to the councils and their planning, I suppose.
That's just right there. After that, mostly Mill was done during direct rule. It was a council decision. I worked for the Industrial Development Board and I surveyed it on behalf of the council. Right. So it was very much a council decision to save one of the last mills in the area. So it doesn't hold function.
Yeah. It's kind of I'm sure that would have been a very risky strategy to do back then, for the council to stick their neck out to do that, which is kind of positive to see that they can make these decisions again if they need to.
I think there's maybe time for one more question. Okay, just the last person.
Hi, everybody. Sebastian, that's great.
So I look after Portland Trade Centre.
Oh, very good.
Sort of deals in it.
Yes, yeah.
So very flattering the you talk about today. I guess one pertinent thing is for anybody who's lobbying politicians, talking to people with influence, is VAT on historic buildings. That's probably the biggest impediment to redeveloping a building. Big shiny buildings don't pay any VAT. Any historic building is redeveloped. You can see the rationale for these unfortunate arson attacks that are damaging Belfast on a fairly monthly basis at the moment. And that is probably one of the most significant financial burdens. There's 25 million pounds to redevelop Side Mills. You strap on them about 30%. That just blows any plans for constructive conservation, which I would be a big advocate. Yes, there's a balance between preserving the Indian character within industrial heritage, but it has to be constructive and pragmatic. But that's really interesting stuff. Thank you very much.
Yeah, we'll just again to thank Sebastian. It's such a brilliant survey and yeah, very inspirational and a brilliant advocate for mills, their history and significance. Thank you very much.
Thank you.